Dredd is increasingly coming to be seen, rightfully, as one of the best movies of the 2010s. It's a brilliant, entertaining, and visually stunning sci-fi action movie, but also contains complex layers of visual, thematic, and character depth. Dredd takes place over the course of a single day in Mega City 1, a gigantic urban sprawl stretching from Boston to Washington, D.C. The movie opens with a set-piece chase scene. After dealing with three perps on a drug-fueled rampage, Judge Dredd heads back to the Justice Department, where he is tasked with assessing a rookie named Anderson, who has psychic abilities. Dredd and Anderson head to the scene of a triple homicide to investigate, and quickly become engaged in a battle against a powerful local drug gang controlled by an upstart warlord named Mama. Dredd was written, edited, and unofficially co-directed by Alex Garland, who had previously written 28 Days Later and Sunshine, and later went on to write and direct Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Civil War.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
Look, everybody makes mistakes, okay? The Beatles, the band that produced the iconic album covers for Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, and Abbey Road, also presented the world with that. We've all had a magical mystery tour album cover moment or two in our lives. It happens to the best of us. Though Dredd was officially directed by Pete Travis, Carl Urban, who played Judge Dredd, said that he turned to Alex Garland for direction throughout the entire production, and that the movie should be considered Alex Garland's directorial debut.
Now we've got a quote from Carl Urban, the star of the movie, straight from Joe Blow, and he flat out says, "A huge part of the success of Dredd is in fact due to Alex Garland, and what a lot of people don't realize is that Alex Garland actually directed that movie."
Following principal photography, Pete Travis was expelled from the editing process due to creative differences with the producers and executives, and Alex Garland took over editing. Dredd has three major characters: Judge Dredd, Anderson, a rookie on assessment, and Mama, the head of a powerful drug gang. A Mama clan member named Kay is a significant peripheral character and is played excellently by Wood Harris. The Mama clan's tech slave is another important side character, played by Donald Gleason. Gleason gave a great performance, disappearing completely into the skin of this cowed, broken little creature. The tech slave is never named, an indication that Mama sees him not as a human being with innate value, but as a tool and nothing more. This theme of utility over personhood is emphasized by Tech Slave's robotic eyes, which Mama presumably gave him after she cut out the ones provided to him by his mother. The same theme of turning human beings into tools of a system of power and control is echoed in the character of Anderson. She has psychic abilities, and despite her failing the judge exams, the Justice Department want her passed as a judge so they can use her psychic abilities to further their goals of power and control of Mega City 1. Characterization is one of the strongest aspects of Dredd. All characters have clear motivations, personalities, and histories, though Judge Dredd's history is kept deliberately vague, in keeping with the thematic presentation of his character as a symbol of justice. To quote Carl Urban,
"He is supposed to be the faceless representative of the law, and I think that is part of his enigma. You wouldn't get to the end of a Sergio Leone Western and go, God, I didn't even know the character's name. It's irrelevant."
Despite wearing a helmet the entire movie and his portrayal as a symbol of justice, Judge Dredd does not come off as a two-dimensional hero character. His character is infused with psychological complexity by Garland's script and Urban's performance. When Dredd is being briefed on Anderson, his superior asks Anderson to demonstrate her psychic abilities by telling her about Dredd.
"What can you tell me about the person I'm with?"
I can feel anger and control, but
There's something else, something
behind the control, something
almost... Okay, Anderson.
Anderson's personality read and Dredd's reaction to it tells us a bit about who Dredd is: a mentally powerful, intensely private man who withdraws from emotional connection with others. He does not like to have his inner world revealed. The scene also creates some mystery around Dredd. This is all done organically. The audience is learning about Dredd through the dramatic mechanism of Anderson's demonstration, which also hints at the extent of her psychic powers. Anderson's mind read of Dredd, like much of the movie itself, could serve as a textbook example of how to do diegetic exposition, that is, to communicate important information to the audience without resorting to clunky exposition dumps or unnatural dialogue. Here's another example of how Alex Garland does diegetic exposition brilliantly.
A rookie judge on assessment is likely to be involved in armed combat. 1-5 don't survive the first day. You may be required to carry out on-the-spot executions of convicted felons.
Anderson probably knows all of this, and Dredd is aware that she probably knows this, but he has to tell her anyway because she's on assessment and he's following protocol, and because she's a rookie about to get thrown into Mega City 1. Her life is now at risk and she needs reminding of the danger she's in. Here's an exchange between Dredd and his supervisor, which is one of my favourite in the film.
Sink or swim. Chuck her in the deep end.
It's all a deep end.
As well as being a great one-liner, this line communicates so much: the brutal danger of being a judge in Mega City 1, Dredd's extensive experience, his apprehension about bringing a rookie out with him, and the exhausting mental toll of working as a judge in the city. A psychological aspect of the movie which will come up again when Dredd is being hunted by corrupt judges who have accepted a bribe from Mama to hunt down and kill Dredd. More on that brilliant scene later. Although he initially comes off as a stoic character, Dredd goes through a vast range of emotions throughout the movie, including disgust, disappointment, anger, rage, relief, and even fear.
If they come for us, we've got nowhere to go.
In the skate park scene, Dredd understands that as proficient a judge as he is, he will not be able to defend himself on a small sports court sticking out the side of peach trees. I don't think he's afraid to die himself, but is afraid for Anderson and the kids on the court, who Mama will not hesitate to slaughter in order to kill Dredd and Anderson. For an actor wearing a helmet the entire movie, Karl Urban gives an absolutely incredible performance as Judge Dredd. It's one of the most underappreciated performances of this century. His voice is the perfect level of dark and gravelly.
Mama is not the law. I am the law.
He achieves a level of intimidating presence with his voice without going overboard and sounding vaguely ridiculous.
So you came back to die with your city?
No. I came back to stop you.
Let her go! Get out of here! Get to safety!
One of my favourite Judge Dredd moments in the entire movie is this brief exchange from the opening chase scene.
Do you require backup?
No.
Fucking awesome. And not just awesome, the kind of stoic, self-assured, masculine awesome that was soon to disappear from the cinema landscape completely. Dredd doesn't explain why he doesn't need backup. He doesn't ask the operator what she thinks. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't make a millennial quip.
Do you require backup?
I'm literally chasing down 3 bad guys with guns. And hold on, I need to count. 1. I'm one guy. Yeah, send backup.
Dredd knows what he has to do here, and a one-word response is sufficient.
Do you require backup?
No.
A particularly beautiful scene comes near the end of the movie when Dredd and Anderson are in an elevator. They are returning to the plaza after defeating Mama. Anderson has been wounded and Dredd is tending to her wound. No words are spoken in this scene. The movie says everything at once with the visuals, acting, and music. We see here that Dredd genuinely cares about Anderson, not just as a judge in training or his charge for the day, but as a person. Despite his ruthless brutality in dealing with perps, he is an empathetic man. The scene also beautifully communicates the bond that has developed between Dredd and Anderson over the course of the battle they have fought together. Anderson looks at Dredd here in a state of total vulnerability and admiration. It's a gorgeous bit of expressive acting from Olivia Thirlby. The elevator scene also serves as a cathartic release after the insanely stacked action of the past hour. This is a perfect example of a movie taking a much needed breath after serious exertion. The elevator scene is brief and, because it has no dialogue, could easily pass a viewer by on first watch, but rewatching it you realise just how fucking good this scene is. Dredd's character arc over the course of the movie is small but important. He initially rejects the idea of Anderson as a judge because she failed the entrance exam.
Her final score was only 3 points below a pass. It's marginal.
It's not marginal. She failed.
There is no grey area for Dredd when it comes to being a judge. You're either qualified or you're not. Anderson is not qualified, so she shouldn't be in a uniform. But he follows orders and takes her out on assessment. In Peach Trees, Anderson loses her weapon, an automatic fail. Despite this, at the end of the movie, Dredd gives Anderson a pass. Prior to Peach Trees, Dredd would not have passed Anderson. So what has caused this shift in his attitude? The obvious answer is that he has seen firsthand Anderson's bravery and proficiency. He has seen how she was forged in the fire of battle, going from a rookie who isn't ready.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
look ready.
To a judge who saves his life. But Anderson's becoming isn't the main reason Dredd gives her a pass. Anderson believes in the cause. She believes that she can do good as a judge.
Yes, I believe I can make a difference.
Dredd realizes how important this kind of loyalty and conscientiousness is after he is betrayed by 4 judges. At the end of the movie, he is more aware of the corruption within the Justice Department and is more willing to place his faith in a single heroic individual. His understanding of the nature of justice is also expanded by fighting alongside Anderson. After a bloody skirmish with 10 of Mama's goons, Dredd orders Anderson to finish off a wounded perp.
What are you waiting for, rookie? His crime is attempted murder of a judge. The sentence is death.
Mercy is not even a consideration for Dredd here. Near the end of the movie, Anderson lets Slave go after reading his mind and discovering his torture and enslavement, prompting this exchange.
Mind explaining yourself, rookie? Abetting a felon is not just a fail offense. It's a crime.
He's a victim, not a perp, and until my assessment is formally over, I'm still entitled to dispense justice, and that's what I just did by letting him go.
Anderson's psychic ability gives her a broader view of justice, since she has always had the ability to see people's inner worlds and understand the motivations and, in the case of Slave, compulsions behind their actions. Dredd sees only the law and its application. The difference between Anderson and Dredd's understanding of justice is visually symbolized by the fact that Dredd wears a helmet and Anderson does not. Dredd keeping his helmet on the entire movie is lore accurate, but the helmet also serves as a symbol of the Justice Department, which provides Dredd with the moral framework through which he views the world. Anderson sees beyond this artificial moral framework. In the final scene, Dredd looks out toward Anderson as she walks away. Dredd looking outward at Anderson symbolizes the slight expansion of his view of justice. It's a small but beautiful character arc. In a 2012 interview with Empire, Alex Garland elaborated on Dredd's arc.
What John Wagner does in the comic is have Dredd evolve in the way that a glacier moves. You look a year later and something actually has shifted. I tried to be true to that. I didn't think Dredd could have a great epiphany, but there is definitely a change in him over the course of the movie. He makes a very clear statement at the beginning of the film, which he then contradicts at the end. That's about as far as the shift goes.
Garland also stated in the interview that he gave a far more traditional, significant arc to Anderson to compensate for Dredd's much smaller arc. Anderson starts out as a rookie, unsure of herself, and finishes as a judge. The final scene shows her heading out into the shit, alone, ready to bring justice to the city. Prior to her assessment, Anderson is alone in an interrogation room. She knows that today is the day that will make or break her dream of being a judge. In a personal moment, she pulls out a photo of her dead parents, holding it close for comfort and strength. When Dredd takes her out on assessment, he asks her,
You ready, rookie?
I am.
Dredd says nothing in reply, but it's clear that he's unimpressed with what he sees. Later, when circumstances are more life-threatening, he makes his lack of confidence in Anderson clear.
You don't look ready.
Anderson's behaviour at the start of the movie reminds me of Mr. Orange from Reservoir Dogs. Tim Roth's portrayal of a cop who is thrust into undercover work before he's ready was so good that it was picked up on by this former undercover cop in a video in which he gives his opinions of undercover cops in movies.
You're not gonna get hurt. You're f***ing Beretta. They believe every f***ing word because you're super cool.
If, say I was pairing up with someone working with another undercover cop, if I saw them do that in the mirror, it would not fill me full of confidence at all. If you need that reassurance, perhaps you're not where you need to be.
Olivia Thirlby gives a great performance as Anderson. She is tasked with communicating poorly disguised nervousness at the start of the movie, a subtle emotion and physical behaviour that is difficult to pull off convincingly. Later, she must be convincing as a badass, without coming off as a cheesy girl boss. Again, she does this successfully. A lesser actress could easily have fucked this role up horrendously. Yes, I'm looking at you, audience favourite Kirsten Stewart.
And who will ride with me? Who will be my brother?
Why was she even a thing? Whatever, let's move on.
And who will ride with me? Who will be my brother?
No.
Dredd is a masterclass in how to do a strong female character right. Anderson isn't an insufferable Karen who talks down to any man she can get within 10 feet of. She doesn't fly kick obliging stuntmen twice her size across the room. She actually has an endearing personality. She isn't a selfish wanker.
All I've known is darkness, but I have never seen a brighter light than when my eyes just opened. I know I will become your weapon. I know, for I have seen I can kill her. And I'd rather me, my brother! Me.
She's driven by a desire to help the city and honor the memory and expectations of her parents. She's honorable, and her physical abilities and limitations are believable. She is heavily reliant on Dredd, both tactically and strategically, in almost every combat situation she's in. When Dredd is distracted, she's overpowered by Kay, because Kay is a strong man, and Anderson is a small woman with no experience in combat. Her escape from Kay is aided by Kay's ignorance of the biolock on her lawgiver, and in the final showdown, she is shot and badly wounded. But she's clearly also been well trained. She's able to fight her way back to Dredd when she escapes from Kay. She performs a beautiful roundhouse kick to finish Kay off, and she saves Dredd's life. Anderson is a believable depiction of a determined, well-trained rookie in her first day of combat. What she absolutely is not is this.
It's true. The Force, the Jedi. All of it.
5 minutes later.
Anderson's pass at the end of the movie feels earned, not forced. Get it? Forced. The casting of Lena Headey as Mama deserves particular praise. Many viewers will assume that Headey was cast because she was a big name at the time due to the phenomenal global success of Game of Thrones. In fact, Headey was cast before episode 1 of Game of Thrones aired. Prior to Game of Thrones, her biggest role was playing the Queen of Sparta in 300. She also played Sarah Connor in the Fox TV show The Sarah Connor Chronicles. The show had poor ratings and was cancelled after 2 seasons. The Sarah Connor Chronicles, like Dredd, has since come to be seen as an underrated gem and continues to develop a cult following as it grows in reputation. Who knows, perhaps one day Game of Thrones Season 8, which also stars Lena Headey, will come to be seen as an underrated masterpiece that did not receive the acclaim it was due at the time.
That's her decision to make. She is our queen.
She is my queen.
Or maybe not. Lena Headey as Mama is one of the best villain performances of the 2010s. Discussing her portrayal of the character in an LA Times interview in May 2012, Headey said,
I think of Mama like an old great white shark who is just waiting for someone bigger and stronger to show up and kill her. She's ready for it. In fact, she can't wait for it to happen. She's an addict, so she's dead in that way, but that last knock just hasn't come.
Headey's understanding of Mama as a fatalistic old monster is deeply infused into her performance. She never seems to get excited about or be surprised by anything. When asked how she wants to deal with 3 rival drug dealers, she casually passes judgment.
Skin him. Toss him over the balcony.
And also agrees that they be given slow-mo without so much as a sideways glance at them.
Hit him with a little slow-mo first.
Sure.
Slow-mo is a drug which allows the user to experience time at 1% normal speed. Administering it to the dealers will massively extend the agony and terror of their final moments. And Mama agrees to this horrific torture like she was accepting a coffee refill.
Would you like some coffee before we serve dinner?
Sure.
Here is my favourite Mama moment.
Kay's dead.
She announces Kay's death as if she was making a banal, throwaway comment about the weather. The way Headey performs the line communicates so much about Mama's character. Human life means nothing to her. Earlier in the movie, she wiped out an entire floor of innocents in her attempt to murder Dredd and Anderson. The way she speaks this line,
Kay's dead,
communicates that she doesn't even care about the lives of her own men. She doesn't even pretend to care for the sake of appearances. Mama rules through terror, not loyalty. She tortures and kills those who get in her way. A simple, effective strategy. At the end of the movie, Mama is sentenced and executed by Dredd. He shoots her full of slow-mo and throws her through a window into the plaza below. He does this to get her dead man switch out of range of the bombs she claims are wired to the top floors. Though this is almost certainly a bluff, Mama is a gang lord. She does not have access to the kind of high-level expertise required to wire several floors of a building with high explosives and connect them wirelessly to a dead man switch, and there's no way she or anyone else would take that massive a risk. A fire or bad bit of wiring could destroy the entire building. Dredd knows by instinct and experience that Mama is likely bluffing, but he's not one to gamble with the lives of innocents.
Can't execute a perp on 99%.
So on the off chance she isn't bluffing, Dredd shoots the bitch full of slow-mo and sends her on a 200-floor journey to hell. Poetic justice for her torture murder of the 3 dealers she had thrown into the plaza at the start of the movie, and her many other crimes. But also a parallel with Mama's judgment and execution of the 3 dealers. Mama judged and executed the dealers by throwing them into the plaza. Dredd judges and executes Mama by throwing her into the plaza. It's also worth noting that in Dredd's opening scene, he kills 3 perps, and in Mama's opening scene, she kills 3 dealers working her turf. Alex Garland draws these parallels to make clear that Mama is the dark inversion of Dredd. Dredd represents order in the chaos. Mama is that chaos. Dredd is the law. Mama is a criminal. Mama publicly sentences Dredd to death.
Somewhere in this block are 2 judges. I want him dead.
And later, Dredd publicly sentences Mama to death.
Mama is a common criminal, and as of now, under sentence of death.
Mama's portrayal as a dark inversion of Dredd has been misinterpreted by some as postmodern moral framing. Dredd and Mama are really the same, you see. After all, aren't they both fighting for power and control? This is a reductive and stupid argument. Mama is shown personally mowing down an entire wing of innocents. Meanwhile, Dredd does everything within his power to protect the innocent. Dredd is not the kind of postmodern shite we would expect from Hollywood today. The movie has a very clear moral framing. The viewer is not told to think of Mama as really a victim of circumstance because she was born in poverty and pimped out and used by men, abused and cut up. So maybe her massacre of
hundreds of innocents over the course of her reign of terror is really just her lashing out at a world that has oppressed and marginalized her and other sex workers. Really, it's a justified rebellion against patriarchal dominance hierarchy that oppressed all female bodies.
There is no attempt by the filmmakers to impose a current year moral framework onto the movie. It operates within the morality system of the Dredd story world. Mama's descent as she plummets toward the plaza is aesthetically beautiful, but is also rich in symbolism. Her falling through the clouds suggests that she is entering the afterlife. The usual image associated with passing into heaven, entering a tunnel and descending through the clouds, is here inverted. Mama falls through the clouds with fires raging behind her. This symbolizes her descent into hell, since that's the only place this bitch is going after she hits the canvas. Unless God is feeling particularly forgiving that day and is willing to give her a pass on the whole minigun murder spree thing. Or maybe she can hire Richard Nixon as her afterlife attorney, because as he has famously argued many times, when a woman commits an atrocity leading to the deaths of vast numbers of innocents,
that means that it is not illegal.
Or she could go for the
defense.
Do you think what he's done is worse than racism? Is what he's done worse than what the people have done that are convicted for racism?
When Mama's head hits the floor and explodes, which I unfortunately can't show in this video, the camera is positioned below the floor in a glass floor shot. The blood erupts across the floor in an X pattern, the Justice Department symbol on Dredd's helmet, a symbolic indication that Mama has been brought to justice. Heidi never goes overboard in her performance as Mama, descending into scenery-chewing gimmickry. Her performance is contained and subtle. Mama's power comes from the terror she instills in those around her. She does not need to resort to loud antics to prove how powerful she is. She does not need to girl boss all over the men around her. She is in command. She has the power of life and death over everyone in Peachtree's. She knows this. Her men know this. The only time Mama becomes visibly angry is when she punches Kay following his escape and capture of Anderson. This being the only scene Mama gets angry in is a brilliant piece of character work from Lena Headey and Alex Garland. As previously explained in the movie, Mama worked as a whore. She was raped and cut up by her former pimp. Then, as the paramedic puts it,
she feminized the guy with her teeth.
Kay and his boys are, obviously, about to torture and rape Anderson.
Now then, what am I gonna do with you?
Kay earlier told Anderson this is what would happen to her if she was captured.
Stuff the clan would do to a girl like you. Nasty.
Mama is angry about the many men she has lost to Dredd and Anderson and her failure to capture Dredd, but I think her physical anger in this scene comes from the trauma of her past boiling to the surface. Seeing a woman about to be raped reminds her of what her pimp did to her. It's important to keep in mind though that Mama is completely indifferent to Anderson. In fact, she instructs that Anderson be murdered. Also notice that when Mama punches Kay, he doesn't fly 10 feet across the room because Mama is a small woman and Kay is a strong man. I miss when when action movies accurately depicted the physical limitations of women. There's also a clear sadistic streak to Mama. She enjoys human suffering. During the minigun scene, she personally takes control of a minigun so that she can savor the feeling of massacre, and she toys with her tech slave like a cat playing with a mouse it may or may not kill depending on its mood. In her final moment, in keeping with Hades' portrayal of her as a fatalist, Mama defiantly inhales the slow-mo Dredd shoots into her mouth, never breaking eye contact with Dredd as she does. Cinematographically, Mama's Fall is a masterpiece. Paul Leonard Morgan's amazing score, the slow motion mixed with real-time speed, the sparkling glass, the image of Dredd standing triumphant, the visual symbolism, and the final gorgeous gush of blood as Mama's head shatters like an egg. The glass floor effect the directors chose to go with for the final glorious impact. Dredd is full of scenes like this. The elevator scene, the miniguns, the bike chase, Mama's Fall. Short, entertaining scenes that are packed with cinematic brilliance. The world building in Dredd is subtle but extensive. The world is revealed gradually in small details and lines of dialogue, rather than in clunky, info-heavy exposition dumps, such as when a character relates information everyone in the room already knows. Dredd's world building is woven so organically into the fabric of the plot that a viewer might not even notice the world building as it's happening. In the opening chase, the perps run over a pedestrian. Dredd responds thusly,
"Control. Perps just wiped out an innocent. I'm taking him down."
This brief line indicates how Dredd, and indeed the Justice Department itself, views the world. There are perps, there are innocents, and there are the judges, the only remaining force for good that stands between the two. A clunky exposition-heavy script might communicate the judge's moral framing of the city in, for example, a walking and talking scene between Anderson and a senior judge. Instead, Dredd communicates the judge system worldview in a single line of dialogue during an entertaining action scene. We don't learn much about psychic mutants from the movie because the characters don't seem to know much about them. In Dredd lore, the Cursed Earth is a radioactive desert, lightly populated by outlaws and mutants. We learn a little more about mutants from an exchange between Kay and Anderson.
So you're a mutant. Most of you poor fuckers got 3 stumpy arms or no arms. Psychic. So fucked up.
Importantly, Kay has a good reason to be talking about mutants here. He has witnessed Anderson's psychic powers and is genuinely curious about them, but he also wants to get Anderson emotionally off balance, as in the absence of Dredd, he may be able to overpower her and escape justice, and getting her rattled will make this easier. An essential element of Dredd's world build that is deeply infused into the movie is the brutality of Mega City 1. The Mama Gang who control peach trees use torture as a weapon of psychological terrorism to enforce their rule. Just before the Mama Clan thugs throw the dealers down into the plaza, one of the thugs drops the slow-mo inhaler toward the plaza. This is a small but brilliant visual touch. It communicates that the Mama Clan want the population of peach trees to know that these men were given slow-mo, that they suffered horribly at the end, that the same fate awaits all who defy the Mama Clan. This event conveys the brutality of the Mama Clan, teaches the audience about the nature of slow-mo, and acts as an inciting incident which brings Dredd and Anderson to the tower. The scene also contains a lot of characterization for Kay and Mama. Mama is annoyed that Kay hasn't dealt with the dealers himself. Kay responds that he feels this is a good opportunity to make an example out of them, but of course he needs Mama's permission for this, since a public display of these men's torture and murder is a political act, and Kay is mere muscle. The scene conveys that Kay has a good grasp of psychological terrorism, since he suggested using the slow-mo on the dealers, that he knows his place, and that Mama thinks nothing of using the most brutal form of torture to enforce her rule. Her decision to have these men tortured to death is the audience's introduction to Mama's psychopathy, a character setup which will have some truly magnificent payoffs later on. All of this is achieved in the space of one short scene. The entire movie exhibits this level of efficiency. Dredd is a masterclass in storytelling efficiency. The brutality of Mega City 1 also extends to the judges. Although it is never made explicit, it is strongly implied that the Justice Department tortures information out of perps. When Kay refuses to talk following his arrest, Dredd says the following:
"We'll take him in. See how he holds up after a few hours of interrogation."
Later, when Mama hears of Kay's arrest, she comments,
"If they're taking him in, he'll talk."
Dredd also uses torture on Kay after Mama wipes out an entire block wing in an attempt to kill Dredd and Anderson. This kind of torture is clearly legal, and Dredd is trying to extract information here, but he's also angry about the innocents that were just slaughtered by Mama, and he is taking his anger out on Kay. Anderson intervenes, asserting that she can extract information from Kay using her psychic abilities. Her torture of Kay is mental rather than physical, but no less brutal, as Kay passes out and pisses himself. No one escapes the brutality of Mega City 1. Not the innocents, not the perps, not the judges, not the rookies, and not the families of the slaughtered. Dredd avoids the garbage action trope of having faceless bad guy minions slaughtered without any examination of the repercussions of their death. Dredd and Anderson enter an apartment to hide. In the apartment, Anderson sees a photo of the man she executed, a family man with a wife, who is now a widow, and a baby, who will now grow up without a father. It's tragic, but the man made his choice and was paid in full for his labours. Dredd also avoids the trope of treating civilian casualties as irrelevant collateral damage, a trope that was parodied in the famous escalator scene in Total Recall. Prior to Mama's minigun murder spree, a father is shown pulling his son out of danger. The father is killed during the attack, and after the slaughter, the boy is shown trying to wake his dead father. Little moments like these help to keep the movie grounded and to show the consequences of Mama's actions, which make her execution all the more satisfying and cathartic. Lex, a corrupt judge who accepts a huge bribe from Mama to hunt down Dredd, comments on the brutality of Mega City 1 in response to Dredd admonishing him for his treachery.
20 years I've been on the streets. You know what Mega City 1 is, Dredd? It's a fucking meat grinder. People go in one end, meat comes out the other. All we do is turn the handle.
Lex is certainly not justified in his betrayal, but the audience has been shown that there is at least some truth to what he's saying. Lex is coping, of course, trying to rationalize his own moral collapse and naked greed. Dredd is right in his assertion that the only force that stands between Mega City 1 and total anarchy is the judges. If large numbers of criminals have to be killed to keep the city from collapse, then so be it. That is the price of order. Lex's dialogue is particularly excellent. He has a great speech and a brilliant one-liner spoken to Mama.
The rookie.
We got her here.
Dead or alive?
Alive.
Make her dead.
The line, "make her dead," is a great example of Alex Garland's instinct for original dialogue. A lesser writer would have mindlessly typed the words "kill her," moved on, and never thought about the line again. But Garland understands that the line "kill her" is a cliche we've all heard a billion times, so he writes something far more fresh and memorable.
Make her dead.
This is just one of the literally hundreds of wonderful little details Dredd is filled with that make it stand out as a truly great movie. Lex also has a brilliant speech which he gives to Dredd after he shoots him. The actor, Langley Kirkwood, gives a superb delivery of this speech. Disgust oozes from him when he castigates Dredd for what Lex perceives as his weakness.
Wait for another 2 or 3 seconds of life because you're so fucking weak you just can't stand to see it end.
This also adds a lot to Lex's characterization. He despises the weak, which is one reason it was so easy for him to, as Dredd puts it,
betray the law, betray the city.
As much as Mega City 1 is something of a dystopian hellscape, the movie makes clear that it is a functional hellscape. People can just about get on through the chaos. The brilliant environmental world building reveals little details like recreation, family life and aspiration, a group of kids skateboarding, a child playing in his room, a mother pushing her child in a pram through the plaza when the bodies hit the ground. Even Mama is shown frolicking in a bath in her character introduction. Mega City 1 is a world in the gutter, and the judges keep it from sliding into the sewer. It's important that the audience gets to see these little glimpses of hope and civilization, because if Mega City 1 was too bleak, too dystopian, it would suggest that the judge system had failed, and that Dredd was merely an enforcer for those in power, rather than an agent of justice and a protector of the people. The brutality of Mega City 1 extends not only to the living, but to the dead. Corpses are recycled by the Justice Department, and not just the corpses of perps, but those of innocents too. In the opening scene, Dredd comes across several dead innocents shot down by a rampaging perp in a mall, and calls it in.
control. Paramedics to my GPS. Multiple wounded and bodies for recyc.
Later, Anderson calls in recyc following a drug bust. The use of the term recyc demonstrates how common the recycling of bodies has become, and that reverence, or even basic respect for the remains of the dead, is a thing of the past. Recycling human remains also indicates that Mega City 1 suffers from chronic medical shortages, which makes sense since this is a post-nuclear war world. Mega City 1 is a society that does not have the privilege of consecrating the dead. None of this is openly stated in the movie, it is implied. This is a great example of how Garland's world building is detailed, subtle, lean, and organic, rather than hammy and exposition heavy. Some viewers will be frustrated by this more minimalist, environmental approach to world building, but most will appreciate that the filmmakers trust the viewer to understand the implications of small details like body recyc, children's toys, and boys skateboarding to impress the girls watching them. Another small world building detail references the degeneracy of Mega City 1. The sign created by an old man begging at the entrance to Peachtree's will debase self for credits. Only in a society in which the most debauched levels of depravity have become widespread could a worthless bum expect to receive financial recompense for self-debasement. Thank God we don't live in such a society today.
Play! Use the fucking double! Shit, guys!
Dredd is a paragon of storytelling efficiency. Without credits, the movie is under 1.5 hours long, but is fully fleshed out with an immersive world, dramatically satisfying character arcs, and a compelling story. Hollywood needs to get back to making the kind of lean, efficient movies exemplified by Dredd. A common criticism of modern Hollywood movies is that they are simply too long. But this problem isn't as recent as many think. 2012, the year Dredd came out, was full of movies that are far too long. The Dark Knight Rises subjected audiences to 2 hours and 44 minutes of thorough disappointment, probably around half of it taken up by Tom Hardy's line reads, which were so slow that I'm convinced he was on slow-mo during the entire production.
And then, when it is done, and Gotham is ashes.
The Hobbit, an unexpectedly bad movie, was an egregious example of story scraped over too much runtime. That cinematic atrocity went on for almost 3 fucking hours. Cloud Atlas was also almost 3 hours. This year, the movie that Mad Max fans had been screaming out for, Not Mad Max, a Furiosa Saga, starring Anya Taylor-Joy as Not Mad Max, and not starring Mel Gibson as Mad Max, bombed. Shockingly. That movie is too long. You could easily cut out 20 minutes and it would upgrade the movie from a solid 7 to an easy 8 out of 10. Of course, runtime is relative. Dune Part 2 needed its 2 hour, 46 minute runtime, whereas the recent Borderlands adaptation came in at a relatively lean 1 hour, 42 minutes, which was 1 hour and 42 minutes longer than the movie should have been. Dredd's efficiency also extended to its budget. Dredd cost $30 million, the 2024 equivalent of $41 million, essentially a low mid-budget movie. Dredd is now over 12 years old and looks considerably better than almost all far more expensive modern movies. Atlas, starring Jennifer Lopez, a movie which I gave up on after maybe an hour, looked fucking woeful, and it cost $100 million. Argyle and Ridley Scott's Napoleon both cost $200 million, and both are shockingly ugly films. Bad value for money in terms of visuals is nothing new. The 2012 remake of Total Recall, total dog shit, had almost triple Dredd's budget and looked like this. The recent mega flop Borderlands cost $120 million. The movie looks like the crappier parts of Not Mad Max, a Furiosa Saga were mixed into a barrel with diuretics and a metric ton of CGI sand. Then this mix was poured through a funnel down the throat of a geriatric unicorn dying of AIDS, and the resulting fecal explosions were used as a reference for the movie's visual aesthetic. Perhaps the most obvious aspect of Dredd's quality is the visuals. Cinematography, camera work, shot composition, action choreography, CGI, and special effects are all excellent. An element of Dredd's visuals that demonstrates the extensive efforts the filmmakers went to in order to create innovative and visually captivating art is the slow-mo sequences. Production used compressed air on human skin, blood packs, makeup, and VFX to create the slow-mo effect. A great example of what can be achieved when practical effects are combined with CGI created by well-directed FX artists. Diegetic slow motion is usually shown from the perspective of the active character, such as in this scene from Futurama. But in Dredd, the slow motion is often shown from the perspective of passive characters, characters who are being acted upon by both protagonists and antagonists, or who are witnessing an event as it unfolds around them. Diegetic slow motion shown from a passive perspective is an interesting innovation, and I can't think of another movie which has done this. Diegetic means experienced by the characters in the movie, non-diegetic means experienced only by the audience, such as the music. Diegetic slow motion is nothing new. Here's a great example of it from Rocky 2.
If neither gets up, it's a draw, and Creed will win the title automatically. The count is still going. Get out from there! Get on your feet!
The slowed down sounds and visuals are supposed to reflect the mental and physical state of Rocky and Apollo. For both men, these 10 seconds are the most physically and mentally taxing of their lives. This is the longest 10 seconds they've ever suffered through. Sylvester Stallone perfectly captures the feeling of total physical and mental exhaustion fighters experience. I've been in amateur boxing fights, sparring sessions, and half marathons in which I was so exhausted by the end that the final couple of minutes seemed to linger in an excruciating time warp where time had slowed to a crawl. A lot of viewers didn't understand what Stallone was doing in Rocky 2 and assumed that the slow motion was used for purely aesthetic purposes. The many Rocky knockoffs which came and went in the wake of Rocky's success led to non-diegetic slow motion in boxing movies becoming a stale trope. Here's an example of it from a generic 2023 boxing biopic, Big George Foreman. That movie is crap. It's just another by-the-numbers cash grab biopic that follows the greatest hits format. The production was so cheap that they used CGI for the arena crowds. The result was that. Fortunately, the movie bombed, making $6 million against a budget of $32 million. George Foreman deserved so much better, as did Muhammad Ali, whose boxing career Wikipedia page highlights were chronicled in 2001's Ali, which was also a deserved box office bomb. But at least now both George and Ali have failed garbage Hollywood biopics with their name on it. I find it fitting that these two great warriors have biopics of equal quality. That said, I did enjoy this exchange from Big George Foreman.
I found Jesus.
You found Jesus. Congratulations, George. I did not know he was lost.
And Sullivan Jones was a far better Muhammad Ali than Will Smith.
Ain't this just a perfect specimen of a man right here?
George, we was just talking about a different fighter.
Rebel Moon director Zack Snyder uses a vast amount of non-diegetic slow motion in his content. The effect was plastered all over his Rebel Moon duology like smallpox on the face of a monster. Now, I don't pretend to have studied the ways of fashion under the tutelage of Hugo Boss, nor would I claim to have been inducted into the Brotherhood of Innovation by David Bowie the Great, but non-diegetic slow motion is cheesy and dated. It's unfashionable. Not fashionably unfashionable, like, for example, trad wife dresses, unfashionably unfashionable, like shaky cam and the Killmonger cut. It is played out, derivative, passé, trite. I categorize it alongside sheer needle drops as movie tropes that must die that movies might live. The sheer needle drop was a staple movie trope that persisted for decades but has recently fallen out of usage. Here's an example of a sheer needle drop from Trainspotting.
She was right. I had to find something new. There was only one thing for it.
It's still cool, but it does have a retro feel. Today, directors prefer to introduce songs diegetically, making their inclusion in the movie feel organic rather than jarring. Here's an example of a diegetic needle drop from The Creator. Non-diegetic needle drops haven't quite gone extinct yet though. Here's an especially horrific sheer needle drop from Borderlands. A fairly clear demonstration of why that trope needed to die. If Dredd had been directed by a journeyman hack director of the early 2010s, it might have looked something like this. Fortunately, it wasn't, so it looks like this. Other examples of diegetic slow motion include the super speed scenes featuring generic super speed character from one of those 2010 X-Men movies, I've forgotten which one, and 2023's The Flash. In these two instances, the slow motion effect is played for cheap laughs and shown from the perspective of an active protagonist. The Flash in particular did an absolutely appalling job with its slow motion effects. The now infamous falling babies scene is probably the only thing The Flash will be remembered for. It's arguably the worst CGI sequence of all time. The entire scene is drenched in a hideous orange-yellow filter, a failed attempt to create a visual brand for the Flash's speed superpower. The babies are the stuff of Dante's nightmares. They look like vaguely alive plasticine dolls. Every surface on screen looks fake, excessively smooth and rubbery, and the Flash's unnatural body movements add an uncanny valley element to what is already a visual monstrosity. The falling babies scene is a perfect shitstorm of everything wrong with modern CGI turned up to 11 and slowed to a crawl so that every disgusting detail is magnified to a horrifying degree. A lot of the CGI in big budget theater release movies is much worse than it first appears. Bad CGI is often obscured using fog, murky color grading, shadow, darkness, blur, and fast cuts. Ridley Scott's Napoleon featured some truly abysmal CGI, but many viewers didn't notice because Scott swamped much of the movie in CGI fog and a hideous, heavily desaturated dark blue color palette. Scott's distortion of the Battle of Austerlitz features some CGI cavalrymen and natural features that are so badly rendered that they look like something out of a 90s PC game. I'm not exaggerating. Those rocks remind me of the rocks from Age of Empire. Great game, man. Lar 18 was rightly criticised for its garbage CGI from the moment the trailer dropped. The 18th live-action plagiarism from Disney flopped miserably, missing its break-even point by a distance so great as to be almost comparable with the galaxy-spanning canyon that separates Halle Bailey's eyes. The worst of the CGI was hidden by the extreme levels of murkiness, fog, desaturation, and darkness used in this cinematographic abomination, and by the viewers' eyelids, since many of them were asleep throughout much of the movie. Here's a clip showcasing some of Lar 18's crappy CGI. Now here's the same scene, but with the saturation and brightness turned up to normal levels, exposing just how bad the CGI actually is. In the falling baby scene in The Flash, as well as much of the rest of the movie, the production couldn't disguise how bad the CGI was because of the slow motion effects. The Flash's CGI wasn't just a car crash, it was a car crash in slow motion. Dredd's slow-mo sequences are slow motion done right. They accentuate the beauty, the artistry of the CGI, and rather than being suffocated by desaturation and darkness to obscure crappy, rushed CGI, the slow-mo sequences are bright, glittering, colorful, and beautiful. Saturation has been turned up to evoke the state of hallucinogenic ecstasy that the junkies enter when they smoke slow-mo. Dredd is a far better looking movie than 99% of the filth that gets shown in cinemas today. Another reason the slow-mo sequences look as good as they do is that Alex Garland went into the movie with a clear vision of what he wanted, which he elaborated on in a 2012 interview with Bloody Disgusting.
Cinema already glamorizes violence. Can you make violence into something which is purely aesthetic? Can it be so abstract that it becomes genuinely beautiful? Not kind of ballet beautiful, but really aesthetically beautiful, even if someone is having their cheek blown out or their head crushing into concrete.
The slow-mo effects in Dredd weren't an afterthought. This was not a case of a director, or more likely, a faceless executive bellowing vague orders into a room full of sleep-deprived FX artists running on caffeine and stale pizza, forced to waste their talents on hellwank like the Flash just to keep a roof over their heads. Dredd's FX artists were able to work toward a clear artistic vision laid out for them by the director and created truly beautiful art. A fantastic little bit of trivia I learned during my research for this video was that the composer, Paul Leonard Morgan, used Justin Bieber songs for the slow-mo scenes, slowed down 800 times as a placeholder during editing before he had finished his superb score.
You know you love me, I know you care.
Paul Leonard Morgan's score for Dredd is a masterpiece. In an interview with Film Music Reporter, he said,
"I was looking to create a timeless score which couldn't be placed in any particular era. So it's ended up being a cross between a modern dance track and evocative soundscapes."
Judging by its Spotify numbers, the Dredd score, like the movie itself, remains underappreciated to this day. If, like me, you are fucking done with modern popular music, and have been for a long time, check out the Dredd score, because it absolutely fucking crushes. As important as it is to praise Dredd for what it does in terms of visuals, I also want to praise the movie for what it doesn't do. The contemporary tropes Travis and Garland avoided, such as the aforementioned faceless minion whose death has no consequences trope. Steering clear of those tropes is a major reason why Dredd is a timeless film. 2012 was right in the middle of the shaky cam craze. 2007's 28 Weeks Later and The Bourne Ultimatum were both successful movies that made heavy use of shaky cam. In 2008, Cloverfield was a surprise hit. The movie used extensive and, for many viewers, nauseating amounts of shaky cam. The drunken cameraman on stilts effect got progressively more extreme, and by 2012, shaky cam had become a widely hated blight on the cinema landscape. Taken 2 and The Hunger Games are 2012 movies that showcase just how bad shaky cam had gotten at the time. What had once been a stylish effect used moderately to enhance the intensity of action scenes had become an intolerable assault on the senses, used by third-rate productions to disguise crappy choreography and lazily thrown together low-grade action slop. Dredd was exactly the type of movie that would have ended up a shaky cam shit show had it been directed by some mercenary Hollywood hack, when every other major action movie was doing this. Dredd was doing this. In the staircase scene, Dredd drops 7 perps. This is shown in 2 shots. The first, a tracking shot that follows Dredd. The second, a perp perspective shot that shows Dredd emerge through the gas. 2 shots, 1 cut, 7 kills in the space of 14 seconds. Let's see how many cuts
The Hunger Games
uses in that same span of time during an action scene. In terms of shot composition and camera direction, Travis and Garland didn't do anything special. They kept it simple. Hold the fucking camera still and let the action speak for itself. It's amazing to think that contemporary mainstream Hollywood had abandoned this idea, deciding at the time that instead of a round wheel, they would reinvent it and make a square wheel. That's not going to make cinema goers want to hurl into their popcorn. The action movie roster in 2012 reads like the rap sheet of a particularly sadistic criminal. End of Watch, Cloud Atlas, The Bourne Legacy starring not Matt Damon, Total Dog Shit, fuck me, that's a reminder I could have done without, the brutally disappointing Dark Knight Rises, Taken 2 starring the immortal Liam Neeson, Wrath of the Titans starring that guy from Avatar who Hollywood gave up trying to make a thing about a decade ago, and whose name has been so thoroughly forgotten that even the guy himself probably can't remember it. That said, Wrath of the Titans does feature the immortal Liam Neeson, who plays the immortal god Zeus, who delivers the immortal line,
"Release the Kraken!"
Resident Evil Retribution, Snow White and the Huntsman starring audience favourite Kirsten Stewart, one of The Rock's many generic forgotten piece of shit movies whose name I could not be bothered copying and pasting into this script, The Scorpion King 3 Battle for Redemption. I don't even want to know.
You fight well, mortal. Perhaps we'll take you with us.
Spend eternity with two mindless brutes and their pet witch? No thank you.
2012 also had the distinction of belching forth the epic mega flop John Carter, which for over a decade stood aloft as the biggest box office bomb of all time, until it was dethroned by The Marvels, starring Brie Larson.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
Release the Kraken!
2012 was a terrible year for action movies and a bad year for movies in general. Here's a few other turds dropped on audiences by Hollywood that year. The first Hobbit movie, Prometheus, the amazing ripoff of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, the second Twilight movie starring audience favourite Kirsten Stewart, and Battleship. The Academy Award for Best Picture that year went to crowd-pleasing laugh riot, The Artist. You all remember The Artist, the black and white French silent movie that has remained an audience favourite to this day. Compare Dredd to contemporary trash like total dog shit, the 980 millionth soulless generic cash grab remake in an era of soulless generic cash grab remakes, a movie filled with the now dead action tropes of its time, a rank little time capsule that carries the stench of 2012 into every living room, unfortunate enough to briefly bear witness to it as the viewer scrolls through the channels. Total dog shit was just one more big budget piece of trash tossed onto the scrap heap of cultural history, there to fester and be rightly forgotten, and one day in the far future viewed in its entirety for the first time in decades by a cultural historian eager to learn about the entertainment of the ancients, though I'm sure he'll enjoy seeing Kate Beckinsale in her underwear, even if such a magnificent sight was ultimately unable to save the movie. Dredd, like its titular character, stands alone, a gem shining bright amidst a sea of detritus. For the sake of balance, and for not criticising 2012 too harshly, as I don't want to give the impression that I hate 2012, the Despot here names my 5 favourite 2012 movies that I do recommend you watch. The Hunt, Argo, The Place Beyond the Pines, The Master, and of course, Dredd. Before I leave the corpse of 2012 to putrefy within the cultural abyss from whence that monstrosity was spawned, I want to stick my boot into that vile cultural low point in human history one last time, because in 2012, this happened.
Today's Channel 6 News, live at 10, continues.
The campaign against African warlord Joseph Kony burst onto the scene last month with a video that went instantly viral.
Firstly, I apologise for triggering the PTSD of anyone unfortunate enough to have been on Facebook when the Kony 2012 virus spread across the world in a foreshadowing of COVID. Kony 2012 was a viral slacktivist campaign that took off online in the wake of a self-purported documentary manufactured to be as viral as possible. To give a sense of just how pestilent the Kony 2012 plague became, here's a comment from a YouTube video called The Story of Kony 2012, which has almost 15 million views.
I still have my Kony 2012 poster from my dorm room for meme reasons. My entire campus was covered in Kony 2012 stuff. Chalk on the sidewalk, posters, etc.
Here are a few more comments from another video about the Kony 2012 mind virus.
I remember being called heartless and a monster, etc. in middle school, because I was like, guys, this is so absurd and silly. We're not helping them by going to school barefoot. We live in the suburbs. Your mom dropped you off in a Range Rover. And everyone was like, but what about the children?
I have avoided thinking about Kony 2012 for 12 years, because it literally broke apart my middle school friend group. One girl wholeheartedly believed in it, while another friend thought it was bullshit. completely blew up the friend group.
Kony 2012 was very much a you had to be there kind of disaster. Over 90% of my friends on Facebook all reposted the same sanctimonious bilge about how horrified they were by the war crimes of some guy nobody had ever heard of, committed in a war they knew nothing about, that took place in a country whose name they couldn't pronounce and which they could not point to on a map. All the TV talking heads and celebrity wankers made damn sure to be seen making solemn proclamations about how shocked and devastated they were when they learned of the events described in the Kony documentary. Kony 2012 was fucking inescapable. It was everywhere, and the company behind Kony 2012 did everything they could to cash in on the production's success. Kony 2012 merchandise quickly followed the movie's explosive reception. There were Kony 2012 t-shirts, mugs, posters, DVDs, and, of course, tax-deductible donations made to Invisible Children, the company behind Kony 2012, which totaled 40 million gorgeous tax-free dollars. Invisible Children Studios, I mean charity, even made a cash grab sequel. They produced Kony 2012 Part 2, the Kony... They produced Kony 2012 Part 2, The Kony Strikes Back. It was essentially a remake of Kony 2012 with the commentary section discussing the success of the original movie. IC Studios were... Oh fuck, it's such a fucking meme. IC Studios were so determined to squeeze the Kony 2012 phenomenon for every last dime they could get out of it that they rushed the follow-up, producing it in 2 weeks, in the hope that they could get it out before Kony Mania cooled off and people found something else to pretend to care about. Fortunately, the Kony Strikes Back met with the same fate as so many other cash grab remakes. Like its spirit brethren, Total Dogshit, and the more recent The Crow 2024, The Kony Strikes Back bombed, receiving less than 2% of the views of the original. As the viral campaign derailed following stunning revelations that no one actually gave a shit about the Kony, it emerged that much of the documentary had been misleading and included outright lies told for the sake of simplifying the narrative to make for a more black and white moral framing of the movie. I mean, documentary. The guy behind the whole thing had a mental breakdown and, in a psychotic break, walked around downtown San Diego naked until detained by police. I made one Facebook post about Kony 2012. I was absolutely appalled at how easily many of my friends had been herded onto the Kony 2012 bandwagon like mindless sheep, and I wanted to mock their simulated grief and what we today call an NPC mindset. So I reposted this wonderful video that my friend Doll had posted.
See this black man? Don't worry, son. He's not really here. Well, see this black man? He's somewhere in the Ugandan jungle, probably starving, battered, sick, brittle, and weak. He used to be the leader of an opposing rebel group called the LRA, which hasn't even been an issue since, like, 2003. Well, we gotta stop him.
Is that the bad guy from the Star Wars?
God damn it! How can you help? You could adopt a Ugandan child, or even travel to Uganda to help starving children. You can help build schools here and take care of the sick. Just kidding, that's fucking stupid and not actually gonna help anybody. If you really want to help them, you should buy our $5 box of stupid shit.
Kony 2012! Kony 2012! Kony 2012! Kony 2012! Kony 2012! Kony 2012!
Looks like our paycheck wasn't very invisible. You're all fucking stupid!
I recently learned from a super Eyepatch Wolf video about a psychological experiment that examined the human tendency to conform to the group. Actors were placed inside the lobby of a dentist surgery and were instructed to stand up every time a bell sounded. A patient entered the lobby and, in imitation of the behavior of the actors, eventually also started to stand up when the bell sounded, having no idea why she or anyone else was doing this. Over time, the actors left the lobby one by one until only patients were left, all of whom stood up every time the bell sounded. Kony 2012 was the dentist office bell experiment on a global scale.
Kony 2012! Kony 2012!
2012 also produced this.
I'm going to give Dredd a B+, simply because it's nothing amazingly special. If you're looking for a movie with a lot of substance, yeah, you're not looking at the right movie. It was a fun B movie.
Rot in hell, 2012. No one mourned your passing, you are not missed, and your crimes continue to grow in infamy.
2012!
No. Unfortunately, few people who would have gone to see Dredd had any awareness of the movie prior to or during its theatre release. It was a box office bomb, making only $41.5 million from a $30 million budget. By the way, the movie did not cost $45 million as indicated on its Wikipedia page. Carl Urban confirmed that the budget was just under $30 million. It is a great injustice to see a bad movie succeed at the box office. What right-thinking film fan was not horrified by Jurassic World Dominion grossing over $1 billion, or Captain Marvel making over $1 billion, or even low-budget, low-effort horror cash grab garbage like The Exorcist Believer making 4.5 times its budget back? Recently, the plagiaristic piece of trash Alien Romulus was a major win for 20th Century Studios, which is owned by Disney. And while the Disneyfied slop that is Alien Romulus has its Disney shill defenders, the movie is fucking awful, and its victory at the box office is bad for film culture because it means that Disney will keep making Alien movies, and no doubt idiots with Disney brain will keep seal clapping for it.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Get away from her, you bitch.
When movies like these succeed, we get the sense that a great swindle has been committed. Worse, it ensures that future editions of similar trash will continue to pour out of the Hollywood sludge pipe.
Oh, you see that? Well, I want you to lick it. Lick it!
But the greater injustice by far is when a great movie flops. The Shawshank Redemption, Fight Club, American Psycho, Event Horizon, Mulholland Drive, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Edge of Tomorrow. These are films which should have had a far greater impact on the cultural landscape than they did at the time of their release. Whether or not they spawned sequels is of lesser importance. I think we can all live without The Shawshank Redemption 2, The Sister's Revenge. And a sequel to American Psycho 2 would have been absurd. Thank God that didn't happen.
I was only 12 years old and I wasn't gonna let Patrick Bateman ruin my life.
Actually, that wasn't a sequel. Lionsgate just changed the movie's name to American Psycho 2 at the last minute in hopes of defrauding American Psycho fans and increasing DVD sales, following the impressive DVD sales of American Psycho. They attempted to justify their fraudulent behavior with a voiceover scene disconnected from the rest of the movie, added at the last minute. Usually, when a movie fails at the box office as completely as Dredd did, it is quickly forgotten and never heard of again. But very rarely, a few times in a generation, a movie is simply too good to go quietly into that great abyss where lies the cinematic refuse of the ages. In the years since its release, Dredd has been granted a seat in the pantheon of great movies that flopped at the box office but went on to find cult success. Dredd's box office failure had nothing to do with the movie and everything to do with marketing. Dredd's marketing was nothing short of disastrous. Carl Urban directly criticised the terrible marketing in a 2016 interview with Den of Geek.
Dredd represents a failure in marketing, not filmmaking. Dredd sold 750,000 units in North America the first week it went on sale on DVD, which earned it a lot of money and the #1 slot. Proof that the audience, once they became aware, wanted to see it.
2 months before Dredd's release, Lionsgate marketing department launched a website called The Dredd Report, which was apparently supposed to be a parody of an American news website called The Drudge Report. The idea was that the website would post videos and news articles about what was happening in Mega City 1 in real time. The Dredd Report website no longer exists, and it was almost completely lost to history. Any evidence that it once existed scattered to the winds of time, the website destined to remain but a shadowy myth, no more than a ghost haunting old PCs stored in Lionsgate warehouses. A vague memory shared by a few senile old marketing veterans who were once bright-eyed young interns. While scouring the scorched internet for any trace of this mythical The Dredd Report, I came across some truly bizarre archaeological finds, including a Carl Urban quote that reads, "I was a fan of the Dredd comics when I was a teenager," printed over an image of an entirely blue canoe lying on a sandy beach, almost certainly the bastard creation of a rogue AI. I found a Judge Dredd Funko Pop comic and an article from Metro reporting, "Police robot told woman to go away after she tried to report crime, then sang a song." Not great law enforcement, but still considerably better than the Metropolitan Police.
1024 on my GPS. Request immediate assistance.
Please hold. All of our officers are busy at the moment.
Convinced that the Dredd Report had to be an internet urban legend, I was about to give up my search, and then... An entertainment news website called firstshowing.net had provided one screenshot of the Dredd Report in their article about it. This image is the last trace of the Dredd Report's existence, and my God, does it look shit. As far as website design goes, it is one of the laziest, half-assed, barren, thrown together at the last minute pieces of shite I have ever seen. I studied HTML coding for about a month a few years ago, and I am confident that I could create a better looking website than this. The graphic design elements consist of a single clip art police siren at the top of the page and 2 Justice Department symbols. Apart from that, there's 4 images and a bunch of hyperlinks. The excuse that they were copying the Drudge Report format is inadmissible. This website is supposed to be reporting news from Mega City 1, meaning it's a website from the future, so make it look futuristic, not something a third-rate high schooler threw together the night before he had to submit his first project for IT class. Why in the holiest of fucks would a production about a sci-fi future dystopian hellscape want to associate itself with media parody? I'm guessing that Lionsgate marketing department decided that since the name Drudge shares 4 letters with the name Dredd, that meant it would be really clever if they made a website called The Dredd Report and published articles about Mega City 1, but pretend they were real articles from a real news site. A video put together by the Dredd Report team that Lionsgate were proud enough of to publish on their YouTube channel was a parody ad intended to look like an anti-drug advertisement from Mega City 1 titled "Say No to Slow-Mo."
They said if I did slow-mo, that I would see the world in a different way. They said it would get me higher than anything else in life. Funny thing is, they were right.
No, there's nothing odd about a product working as intended. That's like saying, we made a shit video today. Funny thing is, nobody watched it. I think what the writers of this video meant to write was, they were right, just not in the way I thought. Anyway, in the 12 years since its publication, Say No to Slow-Mo has garnered a grand total of 32,467 views and 46 comments. By the way, somebody sent that Say No to Slow-Mo video to Zack Snyder. Instead of marketing the movie by, scheduling media interviews, arranging local premieres, things like that, the Lionsgate marketing department were wasting time writing articles for the Dredd Report that literally no one read on a website that looked like it had been pulled off the hard drive of a mid-90s computer that an intern found in the basement of his rundown apartment building. Not satisfied with creating a porn website for no one to visit, and cheesy parody videos for no one to watch, Lionsgate decided to launch a tie-in comic book for no one to read. The comic was a prequel story to the movie. It detailed Mama's life as a whore, her relationship with her pimp, and her takeover of the slow-mo operation. Yes, really, Lionsgate's idea of marketing was to publish a prequel comic to a movie that hadn't been released yet. Lionsgate expected this comic to generate interest in the movie. A comic book tie-in is a piece of merch launched to take advantage of a movie's success and make some extra money. It's not a marketing tool. While no one was reading the Dredd Report articles or buying the spin-off comic, Lionsgate set to work fucking up the movie's trailers as completely as possible. It may surprise you to learn that Dredd wasn't always Dredd. The movie was released under a different name when it came out in theaters. It was marketed and released under the nauseating title
Dredd 3D.
We will be examining Lionsgate's disastrous decision to market Dredd as a 3D experience in a bit, but first, let's get to how they botched the trailers. The first official trailer for Dredd 3D, for some inconceivable reason, had the words Halloween Countdown emblazoned on the thumbnail in a hideous, borderless, flat, bland white font, which was covered in a cheesy blood spatter effect, creating a disgustingly incongruous image evocative of 80s horror B movies. This visual catastrophe looked like it had been created in 20 minutes by a middle school student on his classroom computer that still ran on Windows 95 over the course of a brief Photoshop lesson with a slightly older student. It boggles the mind to think that the marketing department of a major studio looked at this thumbnail and didn't immediately burn the computer the thumbnail was created on in the hope that whatever demonic being that dwelt therein might be purged in the flames, then sent the 14-year-old intern that created the thumbnail to a priest for an emergency exorcism. Instead, they used this fucking monstrosity as the lead image for Dredd's first trailer. And did Lionsgate learn from their mistake and get the thumbnail right on the second trailer? Before I reveal to you the thumbnail Lionsgate went with for the second trailer, here's a few possibilities they didn't go with. The terrifying, eye-catching image of Mama cut up and drenched in blood, smiling menacingly. This single still shot hints at Lena Headey's tour de force performance as Mama and the idiosyncratic insanity of the lead villain. Or here's one of Dredd on his cool bike. Or how about this? Mama perched behind the minigun. Or fuck it, just Dredd with a big fucking gun. There. Simple. So what did Lionsgate go with? A slightly blurred image of Mama frolicking in a bath. There are times in life when one must abandon all attempts to articulate the finer points of one's critical thoughts regarding an aspect of a project they are examining and ask the simple question, what the fuck is this? This is one such occasion. Seriously, man, what the fuck am I looking at? I'm trying to sell a futuristic dystopian sci-fi action movie. How am I going to accomplish that with a blurry image of some random bitch taking a bath? This communicates nothing about the movie's premise, aesthetic, characters, or plot. That said, this thumbnail is still vastly superior to the trailer thumbnail for Borderlands, which was an active warning to movie fans to stay away, one which they fortunately heeded. You might be thinking that a crap thumbnail isn't such a big deal. It was 2012 after all. YouTube in 2012 wasn't what it is today, and that is true. As of 2024, there are 2.7 billion YouTube users, but YouTube still had 800 million users in 2012, and just about every individual in the demographics that Dredd was aimed at, male geeks and action junkies, were watching YouTube videos in 2012. So getting the trailers wrong was no small fuck up. The trailers themselves are bland and generic. Trailer 1 has too much text and exposition, not enough action, and not enough Olivia Thirlby. Trailer 2 is shorter and better, but no one clicked on it because of the botched thumbnail, and it only got 5% the viewership of trailer 1. Compare that to Total Dogshit. The second Total Dogshit trailer got 33% the viewership of the first trailer. So in the lead up to Dredd's release, things weren't going well. A dumb website no one read, and shitty trailers that few people watched, and even fewer got excited for. We will now examine what was by far the biggest cause of Dredd's theatrical failure.
Sentence is
Dredd 3D.
Dredd 3D.
Again, I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker.
Dredd 3D.
Rather than forefront Dredd as a brilliant action movie that film fans should see regardless of format, both distributors, Lionsgate in North America and Entertainment Film Distributors in the UK, insisted on marketing Dredd as a 3D spectacle. Unfortunately for Dredd, the movie went into production at the height of the mercifully short-lived 3D cinema craze. In 2009, Avatar, starring Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang, and the guy from Avatar, became the highest-grossing movie of all time. Unfortunately for humanity, Avatar was a 3D movie, and much was made of the fact that it was released in 3D to awestruck audiences. Sensing a new gold rush like a vulture sniffing out fresh carrion, Hollywood went into overdrive in a lunatic scramble to get in on the 3D gimmick. In 2010, Alice in Wonderland, Clash of the Titans, and How to Train Your Dragon were all major 3D successes. Dredd started filming in late 2010, and the producers IM Global and DNA Films insisted that it be a 3D production. IM Global's parent company, Reliance Entertainment, only agreed to finance Dredd because it was a 3D production. Fortunately, 3D cinema proved to be a flash in the pan. Audience interest was already starting to wane in 2011 as cinema goers tired of the theme park gimmick. 45% of Kung Fu Panda 2's opening weekend ticket sales were 3D screenings, and only 37% for Cars 2. Many people had grown so sick of 3D that they had stopped going to the cinema altogether. The 2011 summer box office was down 5% from the previous year. In an article published during the height of the 2011 summer blockbuster season, Brandon Gray of Box Office Mojo wrote the following.
Despite saturation level 3D location counts, Green Lantern and Cars 2 each debuted with 3D shares in the 40% range, and went down from there. In each case, 3D's more money from fewer people approach has simply led to less money from even fewer people.
Audience reception to 3D had become considerably more hostile by summer 2012. Prometheus only sold 30% of its tickets in 3D format, and some utter shite was beginning to pour out of the Hollywood sludge pipe into the 3D cinema space. Wrath of the Titans, Saint Dracula 3D, Katy Perry, Part of Me, that garbage The Rock movie, The Hobbit, John Carter, and a plague so terrible that had God visited it upon the Egyptians, he wouldn't have had to bother with the 10 he originally had planned, because the Pharaoh would have thrown in the towel immediately. The 3D re-release. The Lion King 3D, Beauty and the Beast 3D, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace 3D, Titanic 3D, Finding Nemo 3D, Monsters Inc. 3D. By the time Dredd 3D came on the scene in late 2012, audiences were fucking sick of 3D. Just the sight of the abominable curse tagged onto a movie name, 3D, was enough to turn potential customers away from watching Dredd 3D. Lionsgate's decision to toss the increasingly tacky and dated label 3D onto the release title was a massive blunder. This label was usually only used for 3D re-releases, which had quickly become widely despised as the lazy cash grabs they were, a kind of cheap forerunner to Disney live-action plagiarisms. Of the small fraction of the potential audience who were aware of Dredd, many probably thought Dredd 3D was a 3D re-release of some obscure 90s B-movie or something. Hey, if Katy Perry can have a 3D movie out, why wouldn't the studio pull some piece of moldy old trash out of the closet and toss the label 3D on it in an attempt to make a quick buck? Hollywood production companies had leapt onto the 3D bandwagon like a pack of hyenas onto a wildebeest carcass, but before they could get more than a handful of movies out in the format, that bandwagon was already careening toward a cliff edge, and rather than jump the fuck out, Dredd's distributors were determined to ride that bandwagon all the way to the rocks below. In the UK, Entertainment Film Distributors refused to provide 2D theatrical prints to cinemas, despite widespread demand for it. Here's a Mark Kermode interview from 2012 in which he gives an indication of the damage the morons handling distribution inflicted on Dredd's theatrical run.
The big 3D movie of the moment is Dredd 3D, a retelling of the Judge Dredd story, which is done very, very well at the UK box office. But The fact of the matter is that I have had tens, if not hundreds, of tweets, messages and emails from people out there in cinema-going land complaining about the fact that they wanted to watch Judge Dredd in 2D but were unable to. Yes, the figures for Judge Dredd 3D are skewed towards stereoscopy, but that's because people haven't been given the chance to watch it in 2D.
That video was originally posted to Mark Kermode's website. Here are a few comments from the original post.
I was forced to see Dredd in 3D as my local cinema didn't have a single 2D screening. I sent them a sternly worded email. They promptly responded apologizing and telling me that they agreed with me and had actively requested 2D prints of Dredd, but were denied them. As a matter of principle, I will not see a film in 3D, and have not done so at all in this current wave of the gimmick. Admittedly, Dredd was the most painful, because since there was absolutely no 2D screening anywhere near me, or even beyond where I'd normally travel for a film.
I was really looking forward to watching Dredd, but closest cinema showing it in 2D was 60 miles away and did not want to watch it in 3D. I will wait for the DVD release.
I just want to add my entry to the list of people who wanted to see Dredd 3D in 2D. I prefer to watch 2D anyway, but the added problem is my girlfriend can't see 3D because of her vision. I have looked around, and one website provided a list of cinemas supposedly showing Dredd in 2D, but I rang the nearest, Bradford Cineworld, and they weren't. Drock! We'll just have to wait for the DVD.
I had the exact same problem with Dredd 3D. I cannot see movies in 3D thanks to my eyesight. Have to wear glasses and it gives me headaches. So despite the fact I wanted to see Dredd, a movie I have been anticipating, I cannot.
And that's just a small sample. There are many more comments from people who didn't want to see Dredd in 3D, couldn't find a 2D showing, and so didn't bother going to see the movie at all. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with 3D cinema as a format. It's not my thing personally, but if you enjoy watching movies in 3D, good for you, more power to you. But there is no question that providing only 3D prints for Dredd was a disastrous, indeed mind-boggling business decision. Why would any distributor artificially limit consumer choice and in doing so lose out on money from potential customers who don't want to watch the movie in 3D because 3D sucks bollocks? It's awful. When I went to see Avatar 2, I actually waited an extra hour for a 2D showing rather than watch it in 3D because 3D is an ugly, nauseating, played out trash gimmick that was conceived of in an attempt to turn film theaters into theme park rides, to treat audiences like children to be dazzled with cheap magic tricks. 3D was an attempt to infantilize the cinema audience, and don't even get me started on those fucking glasses. I clearly remember walking out of the first Hobbit movie at Dublin Road Cinema and handing a pair of 3D glasses to the staff member who lazily tossed them into a big plastic crate filled with 3D glasses, soon to be worn by the next room full of strangers. That was the last time I ever watched a 3D movie because those glasses must have been fucking filthy. And because I was sick of the format anyway. Seriously, man, fuck 3D cinema. It is objectively shit. And if you like it, then you're an asshole. By the way, there are 2 comments on that Mark Kermode YouTube video about 3D cinema. Here's one of them from a user named 21099171162.
Hardly evidence that it is dying though, which it is not. People will eventually learn to like 3D because it deserved to be liked. The only reason 3D is attacked so much is because it is new and people don't like change.
Well, 21099171162, I'm from the future, and I am delighted to report that you could not have been more wrong if you asserted that Dredd lacked substance. I just looked through the schedule for my 2 nearest cinemas, and neither have a single 3D showing this week. 3D cinema is dead. That is a good thing, and I hope the demented soul of this disgusting assault on the integrity of the cinematic arts is burning in hell alongside Kony 2012, Women Talking, The Peach from Twinking Elio, The Dredd Report, and audience favourite Kirsten Stewart's career. I knew Dredd's marketing was bad before I started my research for this video, and I was still shocked when I discovered just how bad it was. A dumb idea for a parody website that that should have been summarily discarded with a mild chuckle when a team member spitballed it into a brainstorming session during an after-lunch coffee high, a comic book tie-in treated as a promotional tool instead of merch, crap trailers with terrible thumbnails, the decision to market the movie as a 3D spectacle, to tag it with the mark of the beast, the refusal to let cinemas run it in 2D despite clear demand, to tell potential customers to go fuck their mothers and take their money with them if they weren't going to watch Dredd 3D in 3D. Dredd wasn't marketed. It was sabotaged. In a 2016 interview with CBR, Karl Urban discussed the movie's terrible marketing.
I think the film had a huge disservice done to it.
Note his choice of words. The film had a huge disservice done to it. Karl Urban was making the point that the marketing was so bad that it actually acted against the movie. When you see the baffling level of incompetence in Dredd's marketing and distribution, you understand exactly what Karl Urban meant when he said this was a failure of marketing. Why did Dredd flop is the wrong question. The right question is, how the hell did this movie make as much money as it did? The fact that Dredd made more than its production budget is astounding. Despite Lionsgate's best efforts to lose as much money as possible on Dredd, the movie did eventually find an audience. Word of mouth about how good Dredd was got around, and it made over $22 million in DVD and Blu-ray sales, and that was just in the USA. When you consider that Total Dogshit made $211 million, you realize how easy it would have been to make Dredd a hit. A normal marketing campaign focused on presenting a quality movie with great actors, suitable to be enjoyed in any format, and a name that didn't make it sound like a Disney re-release, would easily have gotten Dredd well over $100 million, which would almost certainly have resulted in a sequel. Alex Garland addressed his plans for a Dredd trilogy at a 2012 London Comic Con.
We'll see a sequel if we gross above $50 million in the US. In terms of the Dark Judges, the first time I sat down to write a Dredd script, I wrote Death and the others, Fire, Mortis, you know. And it didn't feel right for a first film. I thought it was the right thing to do. I wrote about 16 drafts of it, but it really didn't work out. You needed to have set up the city and Dredd first before you took it on what is basically a kind of riff on the Judges. You need to know what the Judges are before you can subvert them with these supernatural dark forces.
Karl Urban encouraged fan efforts to get a sequel made for years after Dredd's release. In the aforementioned 2016 interview with CBR, he said,
I'm amenable to being part of a legitimate and worthy follow-up to that film. I'm open to looking at any sort of limited exploration of that, and in any medium. The fans are demanding to have more, and it would be a real privilege to continue that story. There's just a goldmine of fantastic stories in the 2000 AD Judge Dredd canon that would be really marvelous to see on screen.
Karl Urban is an absolute fucking boss, man.
I want more. Mama's not the law. I am the law.
It's tempting to believe that if Dredd had become a successful franchise, it would have received the same update for a modern audience that was inflicted upon all popular franchises from 2015 up to the present, an era of cinema that will inevitably come to be known as the woke era. Many fans of the first movie might assume that Dredd 2 would have been just another dreadful sequel. Dredd receives the Jake Skywalker treatment. Anderson is promoted in his place before it is revealed that Anderson is Judge Death's granddaughter, and then she kills Judge Death and Dredd dies from world weariness, and at the end of the movie, Anderson steals his name.
Who are you?
Dredd, Sector 13.
Also, she's gay. And then the next movie, Not Judge Dredd, an Anderson saga, starring Olivia Thirlby as Not Judge Dredd, and not starring Karl Urban as Judge Dredd, would have bombed. But if any franchise could have proven an exception to the rule of the update for a modern audience, it would have been Dredd. The movies Alex Garland made after Dredd, Ex Machina and Annihilation, do contain political elements, but these are mostly non-partisan ideas and themes common to a lot of highbrow sci-fi. For example, the examination of man's psychosexual relationship with machines via the medium of pornography in Ex Machina, or the concept of man as a biological machine rather than a self-determining individual with free agency. As George Orwell correctly stated, all art is political. But Alex Garland never went for the hammy, cringy, sanctimonious, and now horribly dated, message-driven narratives that have decimated entertainment franchises over the past decade. Karl Urban was also dedicated to the idea of a lore-accurate, faithful adaptation of Dredd, and he would have been reluctant to work on a Dredd project that did not involve Alex Garland. By the time Dredd released, Garland already had a script for Dredd 2 written and had done 14 drafts of it, so the trilogy would have proceeded with a very clear direction in mind. My guess is that if Dredd had been successful, the Dredd trilogy would have been the greatest movie trilogy of the 2010s, which wouldn't actually have been that hard. There were only 2 good movie trilogies in the 2010s, Captain America and John Wick. It is not an exaggeration to say that Lionsgate's catastrophic fuck-up of Dredd's marketing and distribution probably robbed the world of one of the great movie trilogies. I will now relate a brief tale of justice, both as a tribute to Judge Dredd and as a cathartic end to this video. While I was writing this script, Lionsgate, the villain most responsible for sabotaging Dredd, released The Crow, an unasked-for, garbage remake of the 1994 cult film that sought to usurp Brandon Lee's legacy. On a budget of $50 million, The Crow pulled in $4.8 million on opening weekend and ended its pathetic box office run with a measly $12 million. The villain Lionsgate was the sole distributor, and this makes them the proud owners of 2024's second biggest box office bomb in terms of revenue as a proportion of budget. What is 2024's biggest box office bomb? I'm glad you asked. Well, as of mid-September, bear in mind I'm recording this before the release of Joker 2, 2024's biggest box office bomb is Borderlands, which made $32 million on a budget of $120 million, and was released digitally 3 weeks after its cinema debut, which must be an all-time record. And who was the distributor of Borderlands? Well, I am elated to report that the sole distributor of Borderlands was Lionsgate. The Crow and Borderlands are regarded as the 2 worst movies of 2024.
Lionsgate, your crimes are the making of a garbage cash grab remake of a classic movie that no one asked for. The manufacture and distribution of the Borderlands movie and movie poster, sabotaging Dredd's theatrical run, knowingly promoting 3D cinema, and defrauding American Psycho fans by pretending that piece of shit with Mila Kunis was a sequel.
How do you plead? Defense noted.